and welcome to the Digital Mindfulness Podcast. This is episode number 7. Hi there and welcome to the show. This is a show where I get to talk to experts from around the world on different ways to create meaningful and beneficial digital experiences. You'll hear insights and ideas from neuroscientists, user experience designers, TEDsters, psychologists, technology professionals, nutritionists, and other experienced professionals who will share their ideas on how we can improve the quality of our experiences with digital technologies. In this episode, I talk with Dr. Kimberly Young, a licensed psychologist who focuses on the treatment of internet addiction. In this fascinating talk, we discuss some of the precursors that lead to internet addiction, why Asian countries were the first to recognize the dangers of too much time spent online, and what it means to be addicted to the internet. I hope you enjoy this talk as much as I did. That description I gave of you just now, that was, all very rote and very kind of data-driven. But I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your history. How did you come to specialize on internet addiction?
Well, sure. Actually, it was back in 1995. I'm celebrating 20 years of studying internet addiction, which is rather exciting in and of itself.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was really very innocent. A friend of mine's husband was addicted to AOL chat rooms, and he was spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week at a time when it was still $2.95 an hour. And, it made me wonder if people could get addicted to the internet in the same way we talk about drugs, alcohol, and sex, because not only did this create a financial burden, but their marriage ended in divorce when he met women in online chat rooms. And, I'd read a lot of joking articles about internet addiction in the 90s, especially as the information superhighway was growing. But then this became quite real. Kind of put a different spin on it. And so basically I found that I took a small survey that I created, posted it online, wanted to see what I would find, taking the same clinical criteria for pathological gambling. And, back when I probably had 2 emails a month, all of a sudden I had like dozens of emails the next morning, stories saying that people lost their jobs and their marriages because of the internet, students across the country having problems with the very tool that they were being encouraged to use. So I expanded my survey, and by 1998 I wrote Caught in the Net, which was my first book on internet addiction, and it was really the first book to identify this as a real problem. And it was certainly met also with lots of controversy. This was at a time when companies just wanted people to get online. They were making substantial money offering hourly rates. We were still dialing in with modems, so the telephone companies were making money. Everybody was doing pretty well with this whole idea of the information superhighway. And then eventually countries like China, Taiwan, Korea saw this as an epidemic. And by mid-2000s, new clinics had started to emerge that were treating this as a verifiable disorder.
So, I mean, you said so much there that I really want to unpack, but I just really want to go back to, I guess, the crux of the whole argument, which is internet addiction. So, could you tell us what internet addiction actually is and why it's important?
Well, like any addiction, I mean, it certainly shows that there's a compulsive disorder associated with it. So you have, a lack of controlled use, preoccupation with use, lying or hiding about the use, consequences of the use, and using it as a form of escape. So all those things are related to internet addiction. So, whether we're talking about alcohol or drugs or the internet, it obviously has similar consequences, things like relationship problems or job loss or academic failure. I've met gamers that sit at their computer for 18 hours a day and, wear diapers and don't leave the computer at all. And so you have to be very careful, I think, about, minimizing the impact of this, because that's what I think we used to do with alcoholism before we really understood it better, or even gambling addiction.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned previously that Asian countries have they recognize this problem quite early on. Countries like Japan and Korea, you said that these were the first countries that really came up and, their government said this is a problem. We're going to call this internet addiction and do something about this. That's really interesting. Why do you think it was those particular governments were so quick to identify the problem and to really do something about it rather than us in Europe and North America?
It really is unclear. They were just having more of a problem with it. I mean, they had gaming parlors and lots of issues related to it that I think, it's considered an epidemic. I don't think it's considered an epidemic in Europe or America for that matter. So, there's obviously then a cultural issue. As I've worked, especially with the Koreans or the Chinese, I've noticed quite a bit about the second or third generation of young males in particular that I think use this as a form of escape. I think, they have no other outlets in their current life for escapism. They're very driven academically. And so internet addiction and gaming becomes a way for them to sort of feel better about themselves.
Mm. So this whole idea of internet addiction, is this something that you think we're becoming more comfortable in recognizing and admitting to ourselves in the West?
Well, yeah, I think it's changed dramatically. I mean, we have treatment centers in America, not only the one I run, which I've ran for a number of years, but there's dozens really of centers really focusing on internet addiction recovery. I think in most rehabs, internet addiction is considered a treatable product line, if you will, akin to gambling or food disorders or alcoholism. So, yeah, I don't really see any controversy around it like I did. I mean, look, in the 90s, certainly it was controversial. Today, I'm not sure why anybody would question it. There's just too much research supporting the existence of it. And now we've gone beyond just like identifying it, but now what do we do about it?
So what are some of the, I mean, if you can share this, what are some of the things that you share with your patients in terms of how they can go about remedying their situation?
Sure. Actually, I have a TED talk on this, and sort of it's what you need to know about internet addiction. And I talk about the concepts that I often use with my patients, which is digital diet and digital nutrition. I take kind of this dietary style approach because treatment's really more like moderation and controlled use, like you would see in food addiction. So I use that as the same kind of concept to, dig deep with clients and look at certainly like digital diet, and it's really like monitoring calories like you would for a food addict, except now you're counting the number of hours somebody spends on their smartphones and tablets and things like that. And with digital nutrition, it's really about what they click on, so that, somebody that might have a gaming problem, for example, they might have to abstain from gaming, but they can still use the internet in very healthy and productive ways, such as making airline reservations or doing homework for school and things of that nature.
Hmm. So, I mean, with this kind of addiction, you likened it to things like, for example, sex addiction or alcohol addiction. Um, and while I'm not a psychologist myself, I'm really interested to kind of dig a little bit deeper down into this. Like, is it a certain kind of person that I guess has an addictive personality that would be that would have a greater propensity to be addicted to certain internet sites?
Yeah, I think, we do find addictive personalities are consistent across all addiction platforms. So, like somebody that's trying to quit smoking starts eating a lot. Somebody who starts, stops eating, might start working out a lot. I mean, we see people sort of substituting addictions. I think overall with the internet, I see people that are very introverted, low self-esteem, social phobic kind of individuals that gravitate towards the computer, and I think they have concerns about you know interacting with people or finding their way in life, and so the internet becomes kind of a safe place, if you will. They feel like it's a temporarily good place to be that looks at, I guess, like for example, these gamers, I've seen an awful lot of them that socially are sort of incompetent, but yet online they might lead, troops of, hundreds of other soldiers, and they're very good at organizing and demonstrating leadership, but it's only in the game. In real life, they really can't cope. So there's definitely a break with reality that I see is consistent with most people that get addicted to the internet.
Is there any link that you've seen between internet addiction and this propensity to spend time online with cyberbullying or trolling?
Sometimes, I mean, with cyberbullying, I think it's just this concept that we live with that, we can say or do whatever we want without accountability online. So it's sort of like even just going to sex chat rooms and people that are married and they're like, oh, I can say or do whatever I really want to do, yet, they don't feel accountable, but it's being recorded somewhere out in cyberspace. So I find that part fascinating, where the idea of anonymity is very powerful when you're talking about the internet, and that's part of the addictive behavior. For the people that are addicted, look, many of us use the technology and the tools and the media very usefully, is very productively. But for those that become addicted, it's obviously maladaptive, and it's definitely something that they struggle with managing in their life.
With this kind of addiction, do you see that it's certain websites or certain kind of forms of websites that get people more addicted than others? Like you mentioned, for example, that doing things like, I don't know, just in e-commerce, like booking airplane tickets, is kind of fine if you take that dietary approach. But with something like, say, social media, where you're encouraged to spend much more time online, do you find that those particular sites encourage addiction?
Um, No, not really. Not that I've found. I mean, again, those are productive tools like travel sites and looking at, Yelp or uh, TripAdvisor when I'm traveling. It's a wonderful way to look at ratings and things. Again, the concern you always have though is that people have one, say, bad experience at a restaurant, and they're going to write about that. But you could have 10 people that have great experiences and they don't write about that. So you always have to take the complaints with a grain of salt, I think, because what I try to do is look at all of it and what are the good and what are the bad extremes. Because again, I think our human nature is you're first going to hear something negative about something versus positive. And, so that's always a concern, I think.
What have you seen, Kimberly, that tech companies are doing about this to alleviate this internet addiction?
The technological industry, I see apps that are out there sort of helping people manage their smartphone use. Maybe, for example, texting while driving is a very serious aspect of internet addiction. And so there's some new apps that I believe like turn off notifications while somebody's driving in their car, and, or disable the cell phone while it's in the car, and things of that nature I've seen.
And I guess one of my other questions is like over the 20 years, what changes have you seen with people and their relationship to technology? Do you think we're getting more addicted or less?
I think it's not addiction anymore. Like I talk about in my TED Talk, the question has changed from how much time online is too much to how young is too young. And the things I'm actually speaking about more is not really about clinical addiction, although that's still, I think, within the mental health field and that arm of what I do. But now I'm speaking to school teachers and school systems and parents groups and talking about the impact of the internet on young children, because children as young as 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going online, which I think is incredibly dangerous. You see kids spending all their times on screens and they're not getting out and playing. They're not learning social skills and collaboration skills and working together in teams. They're just kind of isolated more, or they're learning not to read traditional books because they're scanning, they're skimming, they're scrolling online, but they're not actually reading linear books that actually take quite a bit of concentration. And what I'm seeing much more is we're creating this attention deficit culture where we have kids that can't, spend any time alone by themselves without technology. They don't live with boredom or idle time and get that necessary creative juice going because they're just not sitting still. So, this is definitely something that I think is a problem. Same thing with obesity. Kids just aren't getting out and getting exercise that they need because they're too consumed with screens.
I think one of the problems is that a lot of parents aren't really aware of just how addictive a place the internet is, or rather just how addictive these digital devices actually are. And I think you've likened this whole space to things like alcohol and sex and things like just these things that are very, very, very addictive and encourage that kind of compulsive behavior. And I think if parents were maybe more aware of that, then there would be like an age limit. What age do you think is too young?
Well, I actually have what I call the 3, 6, 9, 12 parenting guidelines for technology use at home. And this is something posted at my site at netaddiction.com, but it really goes through different developmental stages. So from age, say, birth to 3 years old, there's absolutely no technology touching and connection. From say 3 to 6, it might be an hour a day supervised use, but very, very limited. I think from 6 to 9 now we're still talking maybe an hour a day, but there's much more encouragement about social activities, clubs at school, participating with neighborhood kids and volunteering, anything like that to get kids really keeping them motivated, making sure they play with real toys and get that tactile stimulation. I think we really have to be very careful about letting kids just sort of run amok with these kind of games, especially at those early ages. Certainly then as they get a bit older, say after 12, they're going to want their independence online. And hopefully by then you've instilled, I think, a lot of good values in your child. One of the interesting things I've noticed is that for many parents, they haven't encouraged their kids to, say, work outside of school or engage in a lot of physical activities. And so it's easy then to become sedentary and just sit on the internet.
What about, I guess, with like trends with groups of people? What about older people? Are you seeing that there's a lot of cases of internet addiction with the older generation?
I see more of it. Usually, people that live alone and who are lonely. I think they tend to have a much more ability to sit on the internet. They have more time on their hands.
This is really interesting because a lot of what you're saying, it sounds like these are behavioral traits. Like there are people that you can either put yourself into an environment where you have a greater propensity to be on the internet for a long time, or you could just be genetically predisposed. Like you could just have an addictive personality. But this role of isolation is really interesting, and that's something that you found that comes up a lot with your patients.
The anonymity part of it is really a big issue. Like, for example, people that go into sex chat rooms and webcam sex, they kind of show themselves off in multitude of ways except for their face, or, play out fantasies that they might not really want in real life or express in real life. So it's, this whole fantasy effect is a lot of what I talk about, again, in terms of the clinical ability to escape. Look, take a step back. Why do people get addicted? Usually it's a vice. I drink because I'm sad and it makes me feel better, or I do drugs because I don't like my life and it gives me that high I need, or, I gamble because I have no money and I think, oh, I'm going to find fame and fortune and pay off everything I have and live in Tahiti drinking Mai Tais. I mean, we all kind of have a fantasy related to our addictive behavior. And so internet addiction provides that same fantasy component.
And I guess with the anonymity, you can just go online and be your fantasy. You can just be whoever you want to be your avatar, without the messiness of meeting people face to face and learning things like body language and social cues. What are some of the things that you think, Kimberly, that people can take away right now to assuage some of the symptoms of internet addiction? People who might be listening now and thinking, "Oh my God, I probably am exhibiting some of these symptoms."
Yeah, basically, time management is the biggest thing. Like a couple of things in my TED Talk I talk about is like, one, check your checking. How many times do you check your smartphone each day? Do you really need to do this? No. Put it away. Don't put it in your pocket, put it in your purse. When it's in your hand, you constantly check it. But really, try to be more present with the people around you. And that leads to my second point, setting time limits. Do you have to be on this thing from morning till night? Say you're a parent. When you're with your kids, put your smartphone away. Be more present with your kids. Say you're a couple going out to dinner. Why don't you leave your smartphones at home and actually sit and talk to each other at the restaurant instead of kind of using this as a distraction? Maybe, I always say, and one of the challenges I make, is take a 48-hour digital detox and, put the phone on the charger for 2 days and not look at it. Say Friday night, you don't need it, and then look at it Monday morning. And most people would have a meltdown, and I can't do that. So, but it tests the ability of you then to look at your own addictive behavior. I guarantee most people tell me when they do these detoxes, they feel so much better. And then finally, my third point I make is disconnect to reconnect. Establish tech-free boundaries and guidelines at home. I talk a great deal about setting technology ground rules as a family. Like when you're watching a movie, you're all watching the movie together, or at the dinner table, you don't bring your, media to the table and you talk and you don't have the TV on or anything. So I think getting back to some basic fundamentals in our life is really the simple way to begin.
And how about you, Kimberly? Like in just a general day with yourself, how do you make sure that technology doesn't come kind of crashing over you and you don't spend more time than you think that you should? Like, what does a good day for you look like with technology?
I don't spend that much time on it. Mainly, it's just email for work, I would say. But no, I guess I don't find that I use it a whole lot or need it. Now, granted, with that said, I probably would look at my email often to keep up with it, but that's probably the biggest thing I do.
Okay, okay. Well, this is great. I know that we're kind of pressed for time, and so I'm really really grateful for everything that you've shared with us today. Where can people find out more about you and your work? You've spoken a lot about this TED Talk, and I'm going to post a link to that in the show notes.
Excellent. Well, yes, if you go to my site at netaddiction.com, and that's really the place where you can find quizzes, tests, articles, and link right to my TED Talk. So that would be terrific. Or you could go to YouTube and at TED X and Internet Addiction and probably find my TED Talk as well. So either way.
And all of those, they've got links to your books as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, Dr. Kimberly Young, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it, and your work is really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me very much. Appreciate it.
So I hope you enjoyed the insights from Dr. Kimberly Young. As promised, I've put links to all of her details and her TED Talk in the show notes. If you suspect that you or a loved one are experiencing problems or symptoms of internet addiction, I have also placed information for international internet addiction centres in the show notes, and you can find those on www.digitalmindfulness.net. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment or a 5-star rating for us in iTunes or Stitcher, as they really help. Stay tuned for some more excellent episodes where we have some incredibly talented people who will be sharing their insights with you. Until the next time, take care.